My name is Claire Sutton. I'm 31 years old. Every morning, I brew a cup of black tea, step onto the front porch, and listen to the wind combing through the maple trees. This old farmhouse in Vermont isn't just where I live. It's the place I rebuilt with my own hands. 5 years ago, it was nothing but cracked walls, broken windows, and a roof that barely held together. Everyone said it wasn't worth saving. I stayed anyway. Today is my birthday. Nothing fancy, just a small gathering later, with family and a homemade carrot cake cooling in the kitchen. The wooden railing on the porch creaks when I lean on it, reminding me I still have a few repairs to finish. But today, I let it go. Today, I allow myself to feel proud of everything I built. At least, that's what I thought, before the first knock on the door. 5 years ago, this farmhouse was nothing but a forgotten shell. The roof leaked in 3 places. The floor sagged like tired shoulders. The front door hung crooked, barely clinging to its hinges. Everyone said I was wasting my time. My parents, Mr. and Mrs. Sutton, smiled politely but exchanged worried glances when I told them my plan. My younger sister, Sophie, laughed outright. "Why bother with a pile of rotting wood," she had said, flipping her hair over one shoulder like she was brushing away the thought itself. But I didn't listen. I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. Weekends turned into months. Months turned into years. I learned how to lay brick, how to sand hardwood floors until they gleamed, how to rewire old light fixtures without burning the whole place down. I spent nights sleeping on an air mattress in the living room, wrapped in a blanket while the wind whispered through the cracks in the walls. It was lonely. But it was mine. The first time the lilacs bloomed again by the fence, I cried. No one was there to see it. No one celebrated the victories that came in inches and days, in calloused hands and sore backs. Sophie visited once. She stood in the middle of the kitchen, her heels clicking against the freshly polished floor. "It's cute," she said, her voice light but empty. Then she glanced at her watch and said she had to leave for brunch downtown. My parents never stayed long either. They brought casserole dishes, polite smiles, and subtle hints that maybe, someday, I would sell this place and move back into something more practical. I nodded. Smiled. Pretended not to hear the judgment tucked between their words. Somewhere along the way, I stopped expecting approval. I poured myself into the land instead, into the white picket fence I repainted every spring, into the herb garden that now stretched along the side porch, into the creaky attic where I stored old photo albums and forgotten dreams. This house wasn't just walls and windows. It was every stubborn choice I made when the world told me to give up. It was the first time I had ever truly chosen myself. Looking back, maybe they didn't understand because they never saw the work. Maybe they didn't understand because they never wanted to. Maybe they never saw me at all. The afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the kitchen floor. The carrot cake sat on the counter, cooling beside a vase of fresh lilacs from the garden. Everything felt simple. Safe. Normal. Until they arrived. My parents came first, bringing a casserole and strained smiles. Sophie followed, her heels clicking against the old hardwood like warning shots. She wore a pale pink dress too formal for a family gathering, her blonde hair swept into an elegant knot. We sat around the dining table, the same table I had restored by hand from a pile of rotted timber. Laughter floated in the air, light and easy. Plates clinked. Candles flickered. For a moment, I let myself believe it was real. After dinner, my mother stood up, smoothing the front of her blouse nervously. "Claire," she said, "we have something special for you." She handed me a small silver-wrapped envelope tied with a crimson ribbon. I smiled, touched despite the odd weight in my chest. They watched closely as I pulled the ribbon free. The foil paper crinkled under my fingers. Inside, I found a stack of official-looking documents. At first, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. Then the bold black letters hit me like a slap, notice of eviction. The room tilted slightly. The laughter evaporated. The lilacs on the counter seemed to wilt all at once. I looked up. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. My mother twisted her wedding ring around her finger, blinking rapidly. Sophie smiled. Not kindly. Not nervously. But like someone who had already won. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My mother stepped forward, voice trembling. It's time, Claire. Time to be honest about the future. I stood up so quickly the chair scraped harshly across the floor. This is my house, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. I rebuilt every inch of it. I paid for everything. I bled for this place. Sophie set her wine glass down with deliberate grace. Legally, she said, tilting her head, the title is still under Mom and Dad's names. You never officially transferred it. The word sliced deeper than any blade. You knew, I whispered, staring at her. You planned this. Sophie shrugged, smoothing the fabric of her dress like brushing off invisible dust. It's just business, Claire. The property values here have skyrocketed. It would be irresponsible not to sell. I let out a dry, hollow laugh. So this was my birthday gift. Eviction. Erasure. We're willing to help with moving expenses, my father finally mumbled. I took a step back. The kitchen, the walls I had painted, the windows I had installed, blurred around me. I turned away from them. From the betrayal. From the pity. You have 45 days, Sophie said, her voice sharp and final. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I didn't cry. I just smiled. Not out of happiness. Not even out of defiance. It was the smile of someone who had finally seen the truth, and would never unsee it again. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the eviction notice back into their faces. Instead, I folded it carefully, pressed it flat, and tucked it into the back pocket of my jeans. The paper burned against my skin, but I smiled again, small, hollow, unshakable. They didn't know it yet. But the moment they handed me that envelope, they set me free. I moved through the motions that evening like a ghost. Cleared plates. Washed forks. Wiped down the kitchen counter where my birthday cake still sat, untouched. They chatted behind me in hushed tones. Sophie laughed about real estate prices and smart investments. My mother murmured something about helping me land on my feet. My father said nothing at all. By the time the sun dipped below the hills, painting the sky in bruised colors, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to fight them, not the way they expected. No shouting matches. No desperate pleading. I would gather my things. I would walk away. And when the truth came out, and it always does, I wouldn't be the one who needed forgiveness. That night, after they left, I sat alone on the back steps of the farmhouse. The herb garden swayed gently in the breeze, still fragrant from the afternoon sun. The lilacs, half wilted in the kitchen, still carried their quiet, stubborn beauty. I stared out across the fields I had restored, the crooked fence I had painted by hand, the crumbling barn I had patched board by board. They saw none of it. They never had. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through contacts, landing on the one name I hadn't thought I'd need, Emma Davis. Emma, who had helped me pull all-nighters back in college. Emma, who taught me how to read city permit codes when I first started the farmhouse project. I texted her. Need your help. Legal documents. Urgent. She replied in less than a minute. On my way. When Emma arrived, the night had fully fallen. She carried her laptop, a thick folder under one arm, and 2 cups of coffee balanced in her hands. Neither of us said much at first. We didn't need to. She opened her laptop on the dining table, the same table where the eviction notice had been handed to me hours before. I kept copies of all the permits we pulled years ago, she said simply. Building codes. Electrical approvals. Historical preservation notices. I exhaled slowly. The first real breath I had taken all day. We spread the papers across the table, building a fortress of facts between us. Emma pointed to one in particular. A deed application I had filed 3 years ago, pending, but never processed. Someone stalled it, she said quietly. On purpose. My chest tightened, but I kept my voice calm. Then we find out who. Outside, the farmhouse stood silent against the dark Vermont sky. Old. Stubborn. Unshakable. Just like me. And this time I wasn't fighting to prove I belonged. I was fighting to prove I had never needed their permission in the first place. The next morning, I drove into town. The old courthouse loomed ahead, all crumbling stone and iron gates, as if daring anyone to seek answers. I parked under a crooked oak tree and sat for a moment, staring at the front steps. I wasn't here to beg for justice. I was here to find the truth, piece by piece. Inside, the records office smelled of dust and paper and old coffee. The clerk, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and sharper instincts, asked what I needed. Property deeds, I said. Ownership transfers. Anything filed under Sutton Farm, last 5 years. She narrowed her eyes but nodded, disappearing into the back. While I waited, I scrolled through my phone. Emma had sent another message. Check financial liens too. If they used your property as collateral, it'll be there. 15 minutes later, the clerk returned, a stack of files in her arms. This is all we have, she said. But, there's something odd. She pointed to one document, an official-looking lien agreement. It was signed 2 years ago. Using the farm, my farm, as collateral for a private loan. My hands trembled as I turned the pages. The loan amount was staggering. The signatures at the bottom were unmistakable, Richard and Diane Sutton. My parents. They had borrowed against my home. Without telling me. Without asking. Without even warning me. I swallowed hard, forcing the anger down into something colder, heavier. There was a note attached, barely clipped to the back. Loan intended to assist Sophie Sutton, private business venture. Of course. Sophie had always been the favorite. The one they protected. The one they excused. And now, I was paying the price, literally. I copied everything. Scanned, emailed, backed it up twice. By the time I left the courthouse, the sky had darkened with early afternoon clouds, heavy and close. Emma was waiting for me at the farm. She sat cross-legged on the porch, flipping through a thick folder. When I handed her the copied documents, she didn't ask questions. She just nodded, her face hardening. They used you, she said. Not just emotionally. Financially. I dropped into the porch chair beside her, the weight of it all sinking in. Do you think they even realize? I asked, voice low. Emma didn't answer right away. She closed the folder carefully, setting it on the table between us. Maybe, she said finally. Maybe they told themselves it was for a good cause. Maybe they thought you'd never find out. The sun slipped lower behind the hills, bleeding red and gold into the sky. I leaned back, staring at the farmhouse, the peeling paint, the crooked shutters, the herb garden still clinging to life along the porch rail. They had gutted everything I built. And still, it stood. I wasn't sure if that made me proud, or just tired. Either way, I wasn't done. I want to see the full paper trail, I said quietly. Every fake permit. Every forged document. Every lie. Emma nodded. I'll call Chloe. She works at the county's permit office now. If there's a trail, she'll find it. The porch light flickered on above us, casting a soft, stubborn glow against the growing dark. Tomorrow, the real digging would begin. Not for revenge. Not even for vindication. For the truth. For the part of me they tried to erase. And this time I wasn't leaving anything buried. 2 days later, Chloe met us at a small cafe tucked behind the courthouse. She looked around nervously before sliding into the booth across from us. I shouldn't even be showing you this, she whispered, pulling a manila folder from her bag. Emma leaned forward. I stayed still, hands folded calmly in my lap. Chloe opened the folder. Permit records. Noise complaints. Survey approvals. But something stood out immediately. Half the documents had inconsistencies, wrong dates, missing official stamps, signatures that didn't match public records. This one, Chloe said, tapping a complaint letter, was supposedly filed by a neighbor. But the listed address? It doesn't exist. Emma's mouth tightened. She flipped another page. And this, Chloe added, uses a notary seal from someone who retired last year. Illegal to use after retirement. I stared at the pile. They hadn't just manipulated my parents. They had manipulated the system. Forged documents. Fabricated complaints. All to push the sale through faster. And Sophie was at the center of it. The same sister who once braided my hair before school. The same sister who now smiled as she handed me an eviction notice wrapped in silver paper. I exhaled slowly, anchoring the weight in my chest. Is there enough to take this further? I asked. Chloe nodded, almost reluctantly. Enough for an investigation. Maybe more. We left the cafe quietly, the autumn wind tugging at the edges of my coat. Back at the farmhouse, Emma and I worked late into the night. We organized every piece of evidence. Built timelines. Cross-referenced dates and signatures. We didn't speak much. Only the shuffle of papers and the hum of the old space heater filled the silence. By dawn, everything was ready. A complete dossier, clear, airtight. I looked around the kitchen, now turned into a war room. The same kitchen where they had smiled. Laughed. Handed me my own betrayal. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was done. Emma placed the final copy into a large envelope and slid it across the table. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded once. Tomorrow, the lawyers would receive it. The city council. The investor Sophie had courted with her easy lies. I didn't need a dramatic confrontation. I didn't need a screaming match. The truth would be enough. The truth would burn all by itself. And I would finally, quietly, walk away, leaving behind only what was mine to keep. My pride. My name. My home. 2 days later, Chloe met us at a small cafe tucked behind the courthouse. She looked around nervously before sliding into the booth across from us. "I shouldn't even be showing you this," she whispered, pulling a manila folder from her bag. Emma leaned forward. I stayed still, hands folded calmly in my lap. Chloe opened the folder. Permit records. Noise complaints. Survey approvals. But something stood out immediately. Half the documents had inconsistencies, wrong dates, missing official stamps, signatures that didn't match public records. This one, Chloe said, tapping a complaint letter, was supposedly filed by a neighbor. But the listed address? It doesn't exist. Emma's mouth tightened. She flipped another page. And this, Chloe added, uses a notary seal from someone who retired last year. Illegal to use after retirement. I stared at the pile. They hadn't just manipulated my parents. They had manipulated the system. Forged documents. Fabricated complaints. All to push the sale through faster. And Sophie was at the center of it. The same sister who once braided my hair before school. The same sister who now smiled as she handed me an eviction notice wrapped in silver paper. I exhaled slowly, anchoring the weight in my chest. "Is there enough to take this further?" I asked. Chloe nodded, almost reluctantly. "Enough for an investigation. Maybe more." We left the cafe quietly, the autumn wind tugging at the edges of my coat. Back at the farmhouse, Emma and I worked late into the night. We organized every piece of evidence. Built timelines. Cross-referenced dates and signatures. We didn't speak much. Only the shuffle of papers and the hum of the old space heater filled the silence. By dawn, everything was ready. A complete dossier, clear, airtight. I looked around the kitchen, now turned into a war room. The same kitchen where they had smiled. Laughed. Handed me my own betrayal. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was done. Emma placed the final copy into a large envelope and slid it across the table. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded once. Tomorrow, the lawyers would receive it. The city council. The investor Sophie had courted with her easy lies. I didn't need a dramatic confrontation. I didn't need a screaming match. The truth would be enough. The truth would burn all by itself. And I would finally, quietly, walk away, leaving behind only what was mine to keep. My pride. My name. My home. I don't hate them. I don't wish them harm. I simply stopped waiting for them to see me. Some endings don't come with slammed doors or shouted words. Some endings arrive quietly, like autumn leaves falling, unnoticed but unstoppable. This was mine. And it was enough. Have you ever realized you were standing alone long before you chose to walk away? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. And if this moment speaks to you, don't forget to follow for more quiet tales of strength and freedom.